Hello everyone, with the 4.0 beta finally coming out, we also got our hands on the Novaflares. Now, before I get into the video, I just want to give a moment of silence for our fallen comrade, DG Cat. Apparently, they went to a Hoyo event and then posted it online. Not the smartest move. So yeah, no more nice website for the leaks. Moving on though, oh boy did the wrong people get buffed. Rather than buffing these guys, we're instead buffing those guys. Yeah, the math ain't really mathin'. Regardless, let's see if these buffs push our tier 0.5 units into tier 0, starting with Sparkle. Looking at her skill, she doesn't gain any additional amp, but rather it lasts 2 turns instead of 1. Now this kinda got merged with her old traits too, but is now even better. Rather than lasting to the start of the next turn, it's 2 whole turns now. Now on paper, it doesn't really look that useful, as it doesn't really impact Sparkle's usual comps with a hyperspeed Sparkle and a slow DPS. However, this actually opens a lot of possibilities. With this, we actually let Sparkle basic attack every other turn instead, which lets her be very SP positive. At the same time, this also lets you play a -1 setup if you really want to, but it mainly helps with speed tune and when the enemy perhaps CCs your Sparkle or delays someone. But what I'm really excited for is seeing people do some funny stuff with Sunday. You of course can do the Sparkle into Sunday with a slow DPS, but if you have a fast enough DPS, you're gonna be able to do DPS Sparkle into Sunday. And with her number buffs, this actually is a pretty solid team, which you'll later see. Moving on though, the 50% stays. While I know some people were hoping for 100% action advance, I'm actually pretty glad that it stayed at 50%. So she has her own identity of a fast polar with a side of SP, because we do not need a third Bonya or a second Sunday. After that though, I want to check out her talent, which if you look, she now applies vulnerability instead of giving damage percent. So yeah, she's now a harmony unit doing a better job than Nihility. Path rules who? Now, we don't just get 12% vulnerability, as the other half will be located in her ult. Now, speaking of ult, we now get 2 more skill points per ult, which makes Sparkle even more SP positive, which I'll get to how much this is a bit later. As for the second part, we now get an additional 5% vulnerability per stack, so a total of 32%, which is low-key kinda crazy for a harmony unit, as someone like Cypher literally gives 40%. Yeah, Nihility spot ain't looking too good. Finally, for the newest part of her ult, she now gains SP overflow, which she'll convert the extra SP into masks, which when an ally doesn't end with max SP at the end of the turn, she'll eat all the current masks and give more SP until you're capped out. Overall, I'd say these are great changes. More SP is always nice, and it also makes her a bit more brainless as you don't gotta think too much about SP overflow anymore. However, for someone like Archer, you still may want to hold off the ult and do it after his second shot, but besides that, really nice changes. Speaking of SP, how good is she now with SP? Well, pre-buff, she was actually worse than Sunday making SP, assuming they were using their respective light cones. Sparkle would make 1.33 SP per turn, while Sunday would be at 1.5. But now, Sparkle can spend 1 skill point to make 7 SP when she ults. Yeah, you heard me right. With the introduction of her new trace 2, where she doesn't consume any SP in proper play, and her trace 3, which now lets her 3-turn ult with a basic, she is now disgustingly SP positive at a whopping 2 SP per turn. She is now the SP support. By the way, the last part of trace 3 is currently pretty useless, but perhaps it's setting up for a future unit. Now, before moving on to the rest of her kit, let's just quickly go over the difference between damage percent and her new vulnerability by using Archer, who is oversaturated in damage percent. Now, generally speaking, assuming you don't have any vulnerability, my Archer is gaining around 19% damage from this alone. However, if we add in something like Tribby, who is his current second best in slot, who gives 30 vulnerability, it's around 12%. Now, regardless the amount, it is a fantastic change and also helps with the issue of oversaturation. Also, here's her technique, so she can now 1-turn ult like most modern supports. Her next big thing is that she's no longer quantum locked to be at her full potential and gives your team an unconditional 45% attack, which again is great. Not only that though, there's now an additional 10% respin, which is literally a 10% damage increase. Now, to quickly go over Eidolons, she now gains 15% speed at E1, which maybe can help you reach a new breakpoint, but I generally don't think so. Now, her E2 gives an additional 8% defense shred, due to the talent now having another stack. And yeah, that's the new and improved Sparkle, who is genuinely now just a disgusting unit. Prior to this, she was a tier 0.5 unit, and while she didn't have a lot of pull value compared to someone like Sunday, it didn't change the fact that pre-buff, she still had some of the highest buffs in the game. But now, we're getting vulnerability, respen, and also more attack. And from the respen and vulnerability alone, that's around a 25% increase in damage. So yeah, y'all's archers, QQs, and Dan Hungs are definitely eating good tonight. That's also not to mention how we're getting a stupid amount of SP, which I can't really calculate in terms of damage. Overall, with these changes, she easily sits at tier 0 now, even if she only has one relevant DPS for now. What's great is that because she's so strong now, you can play her with other hypercarry DPSs and even a Sunday Sparkle combo because both of their buffs last quite a while. It's actually crazy how much stuff this actually opens up. Buff-wise, while I haven't calculated it, I'm pretty sure she now numerically has the highest raw numbers, topping even Sunday. I'd say Sparkle realistically got everything she wanted. Higher multipliers to warrant a slower DPS, and also more SP generation to solidify her niche and also spot in the meta. After Sparkle, we now got Black Swan, who also got some pretty straightforward changes. So let's see if they fixed her issues, such as her talent being pretty awful against fast enemies, or her ult which is only useful like half the time. Starting off, we're gonna look at her basic and skill. The only notable thing is that they lost her Arcana generation description. This was instead placed into the Trace 3, where now all of Black Swan's attacks will have a chance to apply 5 Arcana stacks, and not just 1. This is pretty nice but a bit hard to visualize, but basically you're getting 48% more motion value per target every time Black Swan attacks now. Is it the most? No, but it's something. Moving to her ult though, she got some really big buffs. Firstly, enemies with Epiphany now have 25% vulnerability on them at all times, and not when it's just their turn. This is great for Dot, as you lost out on a lot of damage every time you had something that could proc dots outside of the enemy's turn, such as Kafka or Hycelian's ult. Gameplay wise, it's of course great, but thematically I will say it's a bit sad, where Lightbreak, they're kinda losing their identity. Instead of relying on the enemies for delayed damage, it's now just streamlined and not much different than normal crit now. There's also now another way of getting Arcana, but the important change is this. Arcana stacks won't be halved after dealing damage at the start of the turn. Yeah, that's pretty dang cool, but this is actually because of the new talent, so let's check that out. Starting off, enemies will now get Arcana when they take any form of dot damage, and not just at the start of the turn, so like the previous change, even more stacks. We will still keep that 240 motion value, but after that tick, we only lose half of our Arcana stacks instead of all of it. With this change and combining it with the other ways of getting Arcana, we'll likely be sitting permanently at high stacks of Arcana, which is as OP as it sounds. To visualize this damage change, I'm gonna come up with a rough scenario that has 3 dot ticks. Now this is super simplified, so it's not going to be fully accurate. In the post-buff version, let's imagine we get 2 50 stack ticks and then 1 25 stack tick. Motion value wise, in a single target scenario, it'll be 1500 motion value. Pre-buff, we could probably get a 25 and 30 stack tick before resetting to something like 5. Totaling that up, we get 620 motion value. Now the exact increase will be determined by if the enemy proc a dot, as there will be that additional 240 motion value as opposed to someone like Kafka popping it. But basically, it's now pretty close to doubling our damage in this scenario, which is pretty nuts. With all these extra stack changes though, to accommodate for her, we can now overflow on Arcana. Holy quality of life change, which you probably didn't even know you needed. After that though, the next change for her talent is a godsend and addresses one of her other flaws. Now, instead of relying on a certain amount of Arcana stacks for additional effects, Black Swan now just comes with it. She now has a permanent 20% self-defense shred, and her Arcana will always deal the blast damage. Prior to this, Black Swan, who in theory should be great in pure fiction, low-key kinda sucked, as every time it was the enemy's turn, it'll just do the tiny pop as the new enemies start with barely any Arcana, meaning also no defense shred. But now, anytime enemies act, we will always get that additional 360 motion value. Next is her buff Trace 2, which now fixes her final flaw. Now, when Black Swan uses her basic or ult, it would apply the same defense shred from her skill. Black Swan generally was a pretty SP negative unit. You needed to balance her energy as you needed the epiphany, and not only that, you had to skill very often in multi-wave situations or versus very fast enemies, because if you didn't, you literally wouldn't have the defense shred. But with this change, it's now much easier to have that permanent defense shred and also be fairly SP positive. On the screen, I'm gonna put something up there to summarize all the buffs for her Eidolons. You can pause it if there's anything that catches your eye. And yeah, that's everything for Black Swan. To summarize, we're getting more stacks, promo debuffs, and now she's pretty friendly towards SP. And she's also not awful against fast enemies or multi-wave stuff anymore. I'd say Black Swan as a niche unit falling under the Dot archetype will still primarily be used in Dot team. While you could use her in place of Ruamei or Tribi for some teams with the ult vulnerability now being permanently up, it's still just okay. However, for Dot, she now actually has a reason in being there, likely being on par with High Ceilings in terms of damage now. You could swap her in for High Ceilings, or you can use the new best in slot Dot team with her, Kafka, and High Ceilings. Now, I'm saying new best in slot because I'm pretty sure prior to this, the Cyrene variation was a bit stronger. But with these changes, Black Swan will finally have a place in the Dot archetype and not just be a Cyrene or Tribi side grades. And as you probably could expect, she's going to tier 0. Like there's no other way to put it. Dot's already a top meta team, so buffing it even more, it's probably gonna be the second or third highest damage team. And yeah, that's the two Novaflares we got, which are actually both so damn strong. Now, I'm gonna be honest, like I said in the beginning of the video, these two absolutely did not need these buffs. It's really cool that they're gonna be and will stay in tier 0 for quite some time, but like, what about the Argentis or Silas? Like, those guys have legit been cooked for the longest time. And now, they gotta wait for the next Novaflare, which is in whoever knows how long. Personally, if I had to put on my tinfoil hat, I'm just thinking that they chose these two as future teammates will likely be coming soon. And also, perhaps because of the China and Japan relations and readjustment of Plan Arcadia, they probably didn't have time or the manpower to focus on the Novaflares. So perhaps the next set of Novaflares will be absolute bangers and breathe life into our older DPSs. As for the Sparkle or Black Swan mains, y'all got everything you could possibly hope for. Sadly, for this to have happened, we had to sacrifice the first set of Novaflares, which, when looking back, Blade and Jinlu got shafted. As soon as the 4.x HP inflation hits, they're going back down to tier 2. Okay, but that's enough yapping. I hope this video has helped you in understanding the new Novaflares. I'll probably make an elation video on the new characters in a couple of days or so I'll hope to see y'all there. Thank you all for watching, and peace.